Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special and epic edition of Wrestling with the Future. I am Angelo DeCipio, joined by the happy haberdasher, Dan the Man Sebastiano. The question, Dan, has been asked from time immemorial. Whatever happened to Eddie Mansfield? The man
Whatever
called
happened
the
to Eddie?
Continental Lover. Whatever happened to him? Tell everybody what happened to Eddie Mansfield.
Well, that is the question. Whatever happened to Eddie Mansfield? Eddie worked in the spotlight as a professional sports figure for many years, first as a professional baseball player, then as one of the top 10 professional wrestlers worldwide. Eddie held that prestigious position for more than a decade before endeavoring to pursue a career in television. A move to New York enabled him to do what he enjoys doing best, which is produce television programming. As an Emmy-award winning producer and well-seasoned veteran of television, Eddie's credits both in front of the camera and behind are very impressive. He appeared in numerous national television commercials for Prudential, Tire Kingdom, Continental Tire Company, and the Muscular Dystrophy Association, with your estranged father, the late Wolfman Jack, to name a few. So please, would you welcome to the show the Continental Lover himself, Mr. Eddie Mansfield.
Eddie,
Hey
welcome,
guys,
brother.
what's happening? Well, I'm glad to
How
be
are
here.
you, my friend?
The Continental Lover, Angelo.
Yes,
The
sir.
Continental Lover, 230 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal. A rich woman's lover and a poor girl's dream. And never forget it.
Oh, man. Make the young women wound and the old women scream, right? Hot damn.
Hey.
Brother,
gotta
I'll
do
tell
what
you
you
what,
gotta
there
do.
are names in professional wrestling that the mention of these names evoke emotion, both good and bad. Names like McMahon, Russo, Bischoff, Pritchard, the Iron Sheik. We love him. And the name that precedes all of these names is the name Eddie Mansfield, right up there with Dr. D. David Schultz and John Stossel. And I'll tell you what, if no one knew who you were before, the world became well aware of Eddie Mansfield, the Continental Lover. And I'll tell you what, brother, there's a lot of people, even today, you can't mention your name without evoking some kind of, like, people either want to pat you or punch you.
Yeah, it's really strange because, you probably saw the Viceland episode I did.
Yeah.
As well as I gave 2020 the highest rated show they ever had, but I'm preaching to the choir, but what I was trying to accomplish was, as a professional wrestler, we're pro athletes. We're some of the greatest athletes in the history.
Yeah.
And when you compare us, I wanted them to compare pro wrestling and the benefits against Major League Baseball, NFL, National Hockey League, and the NBA. All those are billion-dollar industries. And when I did 2020, there was over 35 territories. And Vince McMahon was taking over. And when I did that, our business was a billion-dollar industry. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah.
And what does the promoters give you back for making them millions and billions of dollars? They can't even let you join SAG and AFTRA like other actors who would have insurance and health benefits.
And you know what? Yeah, and Eddie, I'm going to stop you right there for a second and I don't want this to be lost on people. It's critically important that we preface this by saying the reason you went on 2020 to begin with was not to expose the business. It was to get guys health coverage.
Exactly.
And I don't want that to be lost on people. I'm sorry. So continue. Good.
No, and you're absolutely right. And, John Stossel went and made it an ego piece and they barely mentioned the benefits and all that other stuff that I stuck my neck on the line for. And I wouldn't have done the show if I would have known it would just be an ego piece for that little bastard. And so that's what it wound up being.
Yeah, you and I actually, and I'll never give away the contents of our private conversations, But you and I talked about that, and I will tell people, Eddie Mansfield scratched the tip of the iceberg on this issue. Trust me, it goes deep and it goes long and far.
Right.
Eddie, if people understood how deep rooted this, and I'm just going to say it like it is. It seems to me like the promoters, they bear animosity toward their employees rather than, first of all, they don't even call them employees. They're like contractors, independent contractors. But
we're called 1099ers.
Exactly. So tell everybody, Eddie, the implications of that.
Well, what happens is since I did the 2020 piece, there's been over 200 and probably 50 guys that died, and the majority of them died because they couldn't get health benefits and get health care. They couldn't afford to go to a hospital. They couldn't afford to do this and take care of themselves. And that's a sad reality.
It really is, Eddie.
Absolutely a sad reality. And this, I mean, now I'm the guy that made Vince McMahon tap out.
A lot of people say, and I'm going to address that because I actually had a rather spirited debate this week, Eddie, and I want your input. And then I'm going to throw it to Dan because Dan's got a shitload of stuff to talk about. It was said to me by a very, very well-placed source in the business this week, because they knew that you were coming on. They said to me, Vince McMahon directly, as a result of your appearance on 2020, then and only then did he decide to declare himself sports entertainment. And Dan knows where I'm going with this, and he's going to talk to you about this. Your piece, and it's not a stretch to say this, your piece on 2020, as I described this week on our show, it redefined professional wrestling. Dan, you want to pick that story up?
Yeah, I was. That's actually where I was going to go with my first question. Eddie, first, I want to thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I started in the business as a columnist and wrestling historian. That's kind of where I came from. So needless to say, it's impossible to study wrestling history without your name popping up a lot. And I guess I want to ask where Angela was going with that is the big moment where Vince McMahon declared that professional wrestling is fixed. It's not a real competition. And that opened the doors to certain things. Do you think, first off, that wrestling would be where it was in the boom of the 90s with the Monday Night Wars and with New Japan expansion and all that without your interview?
Well, I think that I helped. I shined the light on a dark and dingy industry, and I shined the big spotlights on the big fat rats that ran and hid. And what happened was I took it from the seedy buildings of where wrestling people thought of wrestling, and I put it on the big stage.
Indeed,
and when I
you
put
did.
it on the big stage, I shined the light on an industry and guys that should be paid more and treated better. And kayfabe was invented to keep the wrestlers under their thumb. That's all it was. L.A., we didn't have kayfabe. New York, there was no kayfabe. Only in the more of the southern states and that where kayfabe existed. Because, you can go back. I can send you programs where I was headlining the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the late 70s against Chavo Guerrero. And I can show you at the bottom of that program in really fine print, it will say, these are exhibition matches under the guidance of California Athletic Commission.
Well, then to expand on that Vince McMahon's big thing was he didn't want to pay the fees related to athletic licenses. With that disclaimer that this is an exhibition without straight up saying this is fixed or a work.
Yeah.
Did that prevent that coverage? Did that allow you guys to do the shows without having to pay the competition costs associated with the California Athletic Commission?
Yeah. What it did was only thing that we had to do in Los Angeles was they followed the guidelines of having a doctor there. And most of the time there was no doctors in any arenas, as you guys know. And Dan, especially being a historian, there was no doctors there. But in California, the way they got away with it, they would always have a commission doctor there, but they wasn't paying the commission fees.
Well, let me have you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They said it was an exhibition, so you cannot. That's like charging Hollywood, to put on a Rocky fight for Rocky 2 or 3. You know what I mean? So
right.
Same difference.
Well, let me circle back to the first point Angelo brought up. You mentioned health insurance, and you talked about the reasons behind it. And it's funny because you mentioned actually Rocky is a good example. I've been to a boxing event where they filmed for a TV show and they had to come out, hey, the next half hour you're going to see is scripted, blah, blah, blah. I imagine those actors were better covered than the wrestlers are. So let me give you the floor for a minute. I mentioned being a wrestling historian. I started as kind of a wrestling purist in the mindset of your Eddie Grahams, your Vern Gagne's, your Jim Cornette's, some of whom are openly not fans of yours. Explain from that perspective as a younger, to put in perspective, I'm 37. As a younger person looking at wrestling history, your position, because all everybody knows is the edited piece and the John Stossel and the slap and the fact that you expose the business and you're a snitch and a fraud and all these horrible things that have been said about you. So set the record straight to someone like me as you're explaining the actual history of how they came about, why you decided to do it, how they approached you, that kind of thing.
Well, I wasn't one of the top 10 guys in the business, and I drew money everywhere I went. Like in San Antonio, me and Scott Casey set records in the state of Texas. Mm-hmm. And we drew the largest crowd in San Antonio wrestling history. And at that time, at the downtown San Antonio, and then they tore the building down and built the Alamo Dome over it. And then then Shawn Michaels came and broke my record. But Shawn Michaels at least gave Scott and myself credit for that was one of the top 3 matches at the Cauliflower Alley Club when he was given an award. He said that was one of the top 3 matches he's ever seen in his whole career.
That's fact.
That was pretty. Yeah, that's pretty good stuff. And so Shawn Michaels, he has a lot of me. Jose Lothario trained him, and Jose told him to copy me, because I could get over.
Mm-hmm. And
I drew everywhere I was. I have been as a single and as a tag. And my tag team partner was David Schultz. We got over in Pensacola and Knoxville. And then my other partner was in St. Louis was Gary Gordy, Bam Bam Gordy.
Yeah.
And so, I had a good run until, I had a good run in Atlanta too, but Ole Anderson is the one who really stuck it to me. And because he couldn't get Ric Flair, that's the deal, guys. He couldn't get the boy Ric Flair, so he got me. I didn't have the
I tell you, Eddie, I'll tell you something about that. I know that story. And I know why the decision was made, and it may surprise you, it may not surprise you, but when it all comes down to one thing in this business. It's all about the money.
Right.
And Ole was looking to save money, so he got the in his words, the cheap knockoff. He didn't get the Rolex, he got the The Rolex look-alike.
Got the Folex.
The pole, exactly. You know?
Well,
but,
because when I first went into Atlanta, me and Austin Idol were partners.
Yeah.
And we got over pretty strong. And then Ole came back, and that's when he cornered me and Wahoo in the showers and at TBS. And that's when he wanted me to kick back 20% of my money to him. And
we heard that.
Well, you probably know what I said, so I don't need to.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, Eddie, in the interest of full disclosure, and Dan will tell you, Mrs. Wahoo McDaniel, Karen McDaniel, is one of our dearest friends on the show. She's a huge supporter of the show, and she's been on here, what, Dan, 4 times, 5 times?
Yeah.
Karen's been on here at least 4 or 5 times, Eddie. So, and Karen, and I know that you know Karen. She doesn't hold back.
Yeah.
She went to the Eddie.
Well, Wahoo, let me tell you something. Wahoo got me to go down to Southwest Championship Wrestling out of Atlanta, and I had a guarantee plus, and then I was able to, get over. I got over really big in San Antonio. I popped Scott Casey and myself popped the territory.
Oh, I'll tell you what. You guys were nothing but money, brother. I got news for you. I spoke to Scott this week. I was going to bring him on the show, and he said, no, he just wanted you to have the show to yourself. But Scott and I talked about that. You're laughing because Scott.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah. And Scott
that
said,
nanny goat rider. That nanny goat rider, man. Let me tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, he said you guys were just nothing but green all over.
Yeah, I made him enough money to buy a ranch.
I heard. Go ahead, Dan.
It's like, go ahead, guys.
It's funny. Angelo will tell you, we've had him on the show before, and we usually stay away from the match history, but he can't tell the stories without some of the kind words he said about you, and your staying power is very much prevalent, which leads me to my next question, actually. In recent years, with the current quality of the product declining the way it has, a lot of the old territory tapes and the old, Memphis and Florida and the AWA, a lot of these old tapes and territory matches have been gaining prevalence and in a lot of new audiences. And I'm curious, have you noticed a resurgence of sorts, or at least a I don't want to say increase, but has your popularity changed at all as the era that you wrestled has become a lot more popular with younger fans?
Yeah, I mean, as far as being a recognized figure, I'm gonna always be that, and I'm really, thankful that they're getting to see some of the Southwest Championship Wrestling tapes with me and Scott. And the stuff that we did, because it was revolutionary stuff that we did, and it was really cool. And we were like 2 Brahma bulls, and if Scott was supposed to win, I won. If I was supposed to win, Scott won. And we were throwing curveballs and all this other stuff all the time. That bastard got me stabbed about 4 times,
Yeah,
and so,
I heard.
So, it was, I had a lot of heat. They wouldn't let me go anywhere by myself. I had Larry Lane with me.
There was a story, Eddie, about a woman stabbing you in the butt cheek. Is that what happened?
No, she stabbed me on the arm. She was trying to cut
gotcha.
She was trying to cut the little Continental off,
Oh no.
Yeah, and I hadn't even got to the damn ring yet. I hadn't even got to the ring yet.
I was going to say, I heard that story about this woman tried to stab you, but the person telling the stories is that Scott said he thought they was trying to stab you in the ass, but this woman was gunning for you. She had a knife. That's crazy stuff. Let me ask you a question. Ian and I have had this conversation before on the show. I need you to settle something for me. Why do Southern wrestlers not translate up north?
Well, they they really would if they would be more. I got over like a big shot in New York because of my tape in Los Angeles going into the city, and all the fans. I would get so many fan letters in the Los Angeles office from New York. I translated because I came across as a better person. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That I could put 2 or 3 words together and really do some really cool stuff. And I was high profile.
Sure.
And that's what you have to do to draw up north. You just have to talk, and you have to be able to get over, not only on a microphone, but in the ring. Like today, guys, it's different. That I was taught by some of the best there is, and one of them's Terry Funk. And one thing about it, today's wrestling is completely different.
Oh God!
In my day, you worked a house show differently than you worked TV. You had to work television and really get yourself over to put, the butts in the seat 18 inches, apart from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I was real good at that. And I could draw. I made it personal to people. It's like, just for instance, say if I'm in Texas, I'd look at them, I'd say, you bunch of nanny goat riders. I've never seen a cowboy since I hit Texas. I said, you call yourself cowboys out here? You're nothing but a bunch of goat ropers. And you make it personal.
Eddie, whether you know it or not, and Dan, if I'm lying, I'm dying. Tell him the truth. The other day, I asked a question. I said, what happened to heat? Why is there no heat anymore? Eddie Mansfield just answered the fucking question 3 days later.
Yeah.
That's why. Because
you got to make it personal.
That's it. They're afraid to make it personal. But that's what heat is. It's personal.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that goes.
And that's what you have to do. You have to make it personal to the people at home.
Exactly.
I'd look at them and say, you fat butt old guy, you sitting there and your wife is looking at me, wanting me, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because you're going to buy a ticket Sunday night, and she's going to sit there and just goo and at me because you're not as good looking as I am, and you're not as talented as I am. That's why they call me the Continental Lover. And that's why she looks at you like you're the ugliest thing. You look like the south end of a northbound mule. And that's when you start making it personal to guys,
Right. In that same conversation, I brought up something that's
hilarious.
In that same conversation, I brought up something that's been hurting a lot of the presentation is the overly scripted promos where it's obvious. Somebody with charisma, it's obvious they're coming out and you can't deliver the heat bringing promos that you were just talking about with a script. You just physically can't, because even if you say the best lines and it's obvious that it's rehearsed, it's obvious it's recited, and it doesn't have the same impact. To see somebody,
well, it doesn't, because you look at me. When I hit Texas, first thing I did when they interviewed me, I said, "Let me tell you something about that Rexall Ranger, that nanny goat rider. When I get through riding him, he's going to be having a plastic saddle when I get done with him," and stuff like that. Because you guys can't write promos for me because I'm too damn good.
Thank you. Let me stop you because I got a problem with this term. It is an oxymoron if there ever fucking was one. The term promo class. How do you teach a promo when a promo by definition is spontaneous, off the cuff? You were the king of off-the-cuff promos.
Well, that's what made me draw. I could talk on the mic and I could work in the ring. And
Your
let me
mouth
tell you
got
something.
you in trouble, but it made you a lot of fucking money too, brother. I got news for you.
It certainly did, and I sold out a lot of arenas everywhere.
I know.
And you know something, I could work with a broomstick if I had to.
Yeah.
That's how good I was.
Speaking of the heat, do you think that part of the reason you took the flack you did for the 60-minute segment is because, and I mean this in the most complimentary way possible to your talent,
2020.
It's so easy to dislike you.
Yeah, 2020,
Because,
Dan. We don't want to get
I'm
sued
sorry,
by
I wouldn't do
2020.
Hey, I gotta let you know, guys. 60 Minutes wanted me, but I had to tell Harry Reaser he was too damn old to get in the ring with me.
I apologize. Let me rephrase that. Then your 2020 interview, do you think the reason you took so much flack for it, and I mean this as a compliment to your talent as to generate heat, is because you're just so easily unlikable, or at least you had so many people that already disliked your character?
Yep. And that's what made me draw.
It's the illusion. It's the illusion of being unlikable. That was your job, was to be hated. And people forget that now. You know, people forget that now. Your job was to be hated, booed, spit on, attacked, had your tires slashed in the parking lot. If they're slashing your tires, you're doing your job well.
Let me tell you something. That when I had to drive into like the Hemisphere Arena in San Antonio, they had to throw the gate up at the back of the building and let me drive inside where they wouldn't destroy my car. I had the you're not gonna believe this. I had the president of the Chamber of Commerce and the whole Chamber of Commerce coming to watch me. And he would drive me in, I'd cover up, all the way on the back seat of his Suburban where they couldn't see me when they drove in, right? And then, I'm going to tell you a story. You know who the king of Texas is, don't you, in country music?
Yes, sir.
George Strait. And so George Strait and Ace and the whole band, I know George Strait, he's a friend of mine. And so I invited George and Ace and the whole band to Hemisphere Arena down in San Antonio because he lived in Bernie, Texas. He had a ranch down there. It still does. And so I had, Lenny Denton, the grappler?
Oh, sure.
Okay, well, Lenny Denton's dad, Ed, I told Ed he was promoting some towns for Joe Blanchard and selling out. And I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. And I told Ed, I said, hey, Ed, could you let George Strait and the Ace and the whole band in when they bang on the door in the back? He goes, are they going to be here? I go, yeah. I said, but knock on the door and get me where I can shake their hand and let them, welcome them and tell them do not cheer for me. You know what I mean? So they'll get killed. So, they came in and, they got their seats and George and his wife and this whole band. He's a real cool dude. And so much is always said, Angelo and Dan, about it, some stars don't really take care of their people. Let me tell you what kind of guy George Strait is. George Strait bought all the mortgages for his entire band where they never had to worry about a place to live.
That's
pretty damn
amazing. Good. That is remarkable.
Boy, it'll make you work hard. How come a promoter couldn't do that for somebody? They can't even give you health benefits.
Yeah.
And
that's
where I have a real problem, and I have a problem with that today. There's no sense. All right, you're like AEW, WWE. They're going worldwide.
Yeah.
And it's entertainment. They're on USA Network. They're on Fox. And you can bet Sean Hannity's ass has coverage. You can bet Dana Perino has coverage. You can bet all the rest of them there has coverage.
Right.
But how come a wrestler? It's like I've made this statement, and I know people get hot at me, and they can just fucking get hot with me. Because the bottom line is Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, but he damn sure didn't free the pro wrestlers.
Amen. Well, here's the thing. 2020 has been a horrible year all around, but it's been particularly hard on the world of wrestling. We lost most recently Of course, Road Warrior Animal. We'll talk about him at the end of the show. But James Harris, Kamala, died from diabetes complications.
Mm-hmm.
They had to
Well,
have a GoFundMe for him. I mean, what does it come to, Eddie, when you have to have a GoFundMe for a guy who should have coverage?
Well, that's what I'm pointing out. And also, don't ever forget one of my dearest friends in my life. That was Rocky Johnson.
Yeah.
Rocky Johnson passed away, and had the best drop kick in the business, man. And they talk about The Rock, but The Rock can't handle Rocky. Rocky was the best. I mean, he was really good. I look at Rocky Johnson as the Jackie Robinson of pro wrestling, because when he came in, he drew everybody, and that's the way he had an outlook on life as a babyface. That
sure.
I'm all the people's champion. I'm just not a black person or a white person's champion,
right,
or Italian or whatever. I'm everybody's champion. And if the guys would have probably looked at the way Rocky got over and got his thing, I mean, and handled himself as a professional, maybe they can do a lot better. Because if you could learn from the past, if they watched the tapes in the 80s and stuff, to what we did, it was amazing. Well, I mean, we drew and we were working 6-7 days, 362 days a year. And twice on Christmas Day and on New Year's Day. I mean, they just bled us for everything they could get. And and when you're banged up, they don't want to hear that you hurt. I'll never forget. Scott Casey was banged up one night, and he walked by Chief Wahoo, right? And he says, "Damn, I'm hurting." And the chief looked at him. He said, "Well, if you're looking for sympathy, alphabetically, it's between shit and syphilis."
That's pretty much what Scott told us.
Yeah. That's funny.
Eddie, I want to relate something that happened on the show recently with Dan and I. We interviewed Dominic DiNucci, 89 years old, sharp as a tack.
Oh, Dominic. Yeah, I remember Dominic.
Yeah, Dominic DiNucci. Now, I want you to follow me on this, because I really want your input, and I want you to have a discussion with Dan about this. Dominic is 89 years old. He traveled all over the world. Many times he had to pay his own trans, right? They were making maybe anywhere from $30 to $50 a match, maybe if they got lucky, 75 or 100 from time to time. Right. These guys lived into their 70s, 80s, and 90s. Guys today, they've got guaranteed contracts. They're all pretty much millionaires. They don't have insurance and probably never will. But the guys that were making 20, 30, $40 a match back in the day, the old timers, they somehow managed to work smarter. They worked safer. The guys today are, and the average lifespan, Dan, we talked about it the other night. The average lifespan of a wrestler. Tell Eddie.
Yeah, on the currently the average lifespan of a professional wrestler is less than 50, and Angelo mentioned Road Warrior Animal. The official cause of death was natural causes at 60 for someone who's supposed to be in shape. That tells you something. Yet you see someone like a Nick Bockwinkel or Vern Gagne, or you mentioned like Lou Thez and some of these other guys that Angelo's talked about, 80 plus years old. I mean, Dominic DiNucci before our show was doing yard work for several hours. Like
10 hours that day, Dan.
Yeah, he was worn. Guy 80 almost 90 years old, raking his own leaves. You got wrestlers today in their 40s that can't bend over to tie their own shoes.
Thank you.
I'm wondering what and if I may go back to a story from a show months back, we had Magnum TA on, and he said,
yes, go ahead.
Magnum TA said that when you got into the business, you were wrestling 500 times a year minimum, or you weren't making enough money to feed yourself. Yet you get guys today wrestle half that and are in significantly worse shape. Is there something, maybe some insight you can give us as to why?
Yeah, what are we missing,
grinder,
Eddie? What?
Right.
Why is the? Yeah, what's the problem?
Well, I'll tell you a story. This guy came up to me and he says, "Hey, I've been wrestling 3 years." And I said, "Well, how many matches have you had?" He goes, 30. And I looked at him. I said, "Hell, you ain't even been wrestling a month, man." I said, "I wrestled more than 30 matches in a month." And I said, and what the problem is, guys, is they don't take care of themselves. They're taking, you know, something. If you ever watch any of my matches, and you can watch them all, and I never take a bump unless it was necessary. And when that bump, I took that bump, it meant something.
Mm-hmm.
And so
thank you.
All these guys are trying to work that lucha libre bullshit, and you know, that's fine for Mexico if that's what you want. I mean, I went to Mexico and wrestled Mil Masters, you know, in the main event in the bull ring, but I don't wrestle Mexican style.
Yeah.
And so,
right.
You know, what got me over, guys, was that when I got my heat like a 6'6" guy, and I'd move tables, and I, you know, I'm one of the very few guys that could get Ivan Putski to sell. Because,
you know, you just said something. I'm going to stop you there, Eddie, because you just said something really, really critical. You're not a huge guy, okay?
No.
And that's the thing. But you work like you're a guy 6'5", 6'6".
Exactly.
That skill comes from being able to work. The problem, as I see it, and Dan and I have had this discussion on the show.
Oh, yeah, several times.
They can't work. I mean, when you have to, Dan, please tell me if I'm bullshitting. When you have to open up your match with a 5-star frog splash off the top rope into a triple gainer, into a split, and then jump into a handstand, and that's your opening set, there's a problem. Because where do you go from there? Do you, and I've jokingly said this before, what do you set yourself on fire?
Yeah, that's goes to
and one guy did.
Oh no, and that's exactly what we were talking about. Is the spots, like you were saying, Eddie, with working smart, not taking bumps you didn't have to. You watch these matches nowadays, and it's curtain jerkers, lower mid card fodder, and you know a power bomb off the second rope through a table, and it's not the finish. You have these ridiculous bumps, 10, 12 of them in a match, and it's not the finish. There's no grapple, and the problem is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I want you to expand on this because of your history with understanding the technical side. When you get these superhuman feats of craziness, 10, 12, 15 of them a match that don't go anywhere, it kills the realism. It doesn't make the match look like a real fight at all. Your matches in Texas and California and some of these bits you had, yeah, it was scripted and you were working together, but you guys still look like you were trying to kill each other. If I'm beating you over the head with a baseball bat and that's not the finish, clearly we're not actually fighting.
Exactly. Well, that's the problem with today's too many independents that don't respect the squared circle the way it should be. And you know, they can say what they want about me, but I can guarantee you could put me in the ring with anybody right now, and I could outwork them.
Here's the scary part, Eddie. The examples that Dan just gave you were not from the indies. They were from the major feds, WWE and AEW.
Yeah, and that's the
scary
part. Well, when you have 15 false finishes on a TV match,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
A TV match should never ever go over 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And I'm going to tell you why. Because that makes it keep moving. And then you shoot your angles, you shoot all that stuff the way it should be shot. See, you got writers that have never taken a bump. Writers they think they know the business, but they don't know the psychology of the business.
Yeah.
And how in the world could you write a script for Wahoo McDaniel and tell him what to say,
Yeah.
or Ric Flair, or Eddie Mansfield, or Rocky Johnson, guys that could talk? You can't script me. I mean, because you're going to kill me.
Eddie,
I mean, because that's not my words. That's some jackass's words who can't even talk him own self. You know, it's like, come on.
Eddie, I got to tell you something. Dan and I had the most famous wrestling writer in the history of wrestling on our show. Not once, but 3 times now. A guy named Vince Russo. He's got one of those names like McMahon, Mansfield, Bischoff that just draws the ire of people. You either love this guy or you hate him. It's clear that you're not a Daniel. What are you laughing?
No, you're absolutely right.
But you understand?
So
talk to
excuse
Eddie.
me.
Talk to him.
So Dan, I'm number one. I'm really hurt, Angelo, that you put me in the class of those two guys. I thought I was still number one on the most hated. You know.
Well, no, you heard what I said. I said before any of these names, there was Mansfield. You're the guy.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, look, at least you're a trend. Look, your whole career, Eddie, you've been a trendsetter, okay? Can we establish that?
Yeah.
Okay, now, because, and first of all, we're going to have to address head on the 2020 episode because we really haven't delved really deep into it yet. Because I got a problem even today with John Stossel because I think he's a prick. Okay.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
And I think he's a lying, manipulative prick. And if you're watching Stossel, fuck you.
I was going to say he straight up called it. Eddie mentioned the Vice episode. He straight up at the end of that episode, as soon as I got that paycheck, all my symptoms went away. He admitted he was a lying piece of shit.
Of course.
Well, that's what I told you. I've been
Exactly.
saying that. If you watch any interviews I've ever done, I've always
So
said
who's
that
the
all
worker,
way through.
Eddie? Who's the worker? Okay. That guy worked it like a fucking pro. He worked it like he'd been in the business his whole life.
Yeah. And here I am. I'm shooting, and really trying to get something accomplished for the professional wrestling business for the guys.
Exactly.
And this guy, he pulls out, because I told him not to interview David Schultz because Vince was trying to get rid of him. And that he would get, it's in the transcript, that he would get the shit slapped out of him.
That's true.
And he
That's
did.
absolutely true.
Greatest
I
moment.
want you to, you know what, Eddie, have that conversation with Dan. You and Dan have that conversation because I know too much about that, and so I'm not going to tip my hat. Dan, why don't you pursue that line of questioning with Eddie?
Well, you were saying the earlier you mentioned that they kind of edited your footage a bit and kind of presented a different side to it. Go expand on that then. The conversation you had with John Stossel, if you present this a certain X, Y, and Z way, you're going to make enemies. How did that go?
Well, they really just destroyed. I should have got final edit. If I'd have been a little smarter and been in the television business, like I am now, I would have required final edit. And I didn't. And so Stossel, they just chopped it up and kind of buried me and made him supposed to be a good guy. I talked to that prick on the phone one day, and I told him, I said, you know something, Stossel? I said, you wasn't shit until you met Eddie Mansfield. I made you a star. And I said, you got all that money. You didn't even bother to send me 10%. I said, you should have sent me 10% of that damn money. And I said, that's the only reason your ass sat in that desk next to Barbara Wawa is because I got you there. He wasn't nothing but a damn old little old reporter in New York, you know, doing this little bullshit. That's all.
Yep. Well, then going off that, the narrative, what you were saying, where you warned him he was going to get slapped, was do you think that a physical altercation is what he was going for, or was he more going for that gotcha moment and he just had no idea what he was stepping into?
Oh, I got to jump in here. Hold up. I got to jump in here.
No, I'll answer that question. He got a double gotcha moment.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you what. I think he was looking. To be honest with you, my take then and my take now is that he was looking for somebody to crack him.
Oh yeah, that's what he wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. He wanted somebody to wail on him. This guy went in there knowing he was going to walk out with a payday, and you know it, Eddie. You know it.
Oh, I know, and you know they had all the other stuff that I said that I'm still saying today on the cutting room floor, because it was an ego piece. You know, it was all about him suing. See, he had a motive behind it.
Let's address the issue of how David Schultz even came into that situation, because my understanding was that they actually asked someone else to address the issue with Stossel. But my inside source told me that it was Hulk Hogan who basically forced the hand of Vince McMahon to put David Schultz out there. Is that pretty much what you know?
Well, I just know that he went, everybody that I told him not to interview and show, you know, like my friends with the Briscoes and Dick Murdoch and all these other guys that were my buddies, I told him don't bring them into this, because it's me. It's not them. They're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And then I warned them about David, that he would get whacked. Well, that's what he did. He interviewed Hogan on Broadway, and then he went to Schultz. Then Vince went on there and said, well, you know, Vince likes any publicity, don't matter to him. But anyway, Vince, you know, just says, oh, well, it would never happen in the, you know, the WWF yet. Well, it always does. How many families has he devastated? A lot more.
Yeah.
And so, you know, David was kind of set up. And he
Clearly.
He not only from Vince's side, but from the Stossel side. So, you know, he got, and he was, you know, stupid enough to go for it. And he bought it. Hook, line,
but, you know, they always say, Eddie, you can't work a worker. How did David Schultz, who, and I've had the chance to speak to him a few times, he's not a stupid guy. He's a really smart guy. How did he let himself open for that? Because they laid in wait for him. They really did.
Well, here's the word I always told him never to use, was fake. Because professional wrestling is not fake. It's predetermined.
Right.
That makes that's a whole lot of difference.
Oh yeah.
Calling somebody fake than being predetermined. You know, and it's no different than a stuntman in the movies. That's predetermined, but the falls fill the damn fall. I mean, if I take a suplex off the top rope, I don't stop, you know, 2 inches from the mat. I hit hard, and that's not fake.
Yep.
Is that all it took for David to pop off? Was that his hair trigger?
Yeah, fake.
As soon as they said fake, it set him off.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. God, I'm
That
sorry.
was it. And any other wrestler, it would have set him off too.
Yeah, there's several high profile Vader's interview in Kuwait, Hulk Hogan and Richard Belzer. Yes, where you can't tell, especially back in the day when it was still protected. So let me ask you something to continue there. You kind of from the I almost said it again, from 2020, you ended up blacklisted from wrestling, and for a long time so did the media, as far as people not want to do the kind of Stossel-esque interviews. Everything was very highly vetted and whatnot. I'm curious, is there any kind, other than the obvious what we've spoken about already, is there hard feelings towards the business, or does your emotion in this situation fall entirely on Stossel and his crew?
Well, I never had hard feelings towards the wrestling business. I never quit the wrestling business. It quit me. And that came from Ole Anderson.
Yeah.
And I have all the respect in the world for every professional wrestler. And it's a tough business. And you got to be tough to handle it, in the right way. I mean, to be one of the top guys, you have to be a politician.
Oh boy.
You have to be you have to be a great athlete. You have to be able to do interviews that would draw crowds. And it's a business. Always remember this, fellas.
Yeah.
It's called wrestling business.
Yep.
Without the business, there's no wrestling. And, it's like I always said about the NWA, and that was all a monopoly. It was kind of like an inbred of all the Fullers and the Welches and the Jarretts. They ran all the NWA.
Yeah.
And the Welches, the Fullers, and everybody. So that was, and Barnett was their front guy. And so,
sure.
You know what? The NWA
Jim Barnett. There's a guy. There's a name. Let's talk about him for a minute, Eddie. You hear a lot about Jim Barnett. He was, in the interest of full disclosure, Jim Barnett was an openly gay guy in wrestling at a time when it was highly unusual to be open about your sexuality. Barnett didn't care because he had enough money not to give a shit. He was a very wealthy guy. Let's talk about his influence, especially in NWA, because you mentioned a couple of names there. We've actually had very recently, in fact, Dan and I had Ron Fuller on the show, and actually Ron's coming back in about 3 weeks in October. And he's a good friend of the show.
I used to live with Ron Fuller.
No shit.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to find out this story. Go ahead.
But anyway, I'm going to answer it with Barnett. Let me tell you about Barnett.
Yeah, please do.
The wrestlers and a lot of other people from the outside didn't realize he was a front for the whole wrestling business, because he could get he knew the television side of the business. He's the one who did the deal with TBS and Turner, and it's called the Gay Mafia. And so he's a part of that gay mafia, and he could go to his connections and make sure that contract with TBS remained intact. And that's what he did. And then he went and helped Vince McMahon secure the same stuff.
Yeah.
But Vince, he's not loyal to anyone.
Don't we know that?
Right.
And so, he kicked, he kind of threw Barnett to the curb, kind of like he did Jerry Briscoe.
I was just about to say. Yep. Just
You
fired Briscoe about a week ago.
Well, okay, you're a historian, Dan.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you a question. Do you know how WrestleMania took place? You know how that happened?
I know that it was in well, the they were pitching because they loved their rhyming pay-per-views at the time, or rhyming events, I should say. I know that the idea being it was, for lack of a better term, it was what's the word I'm looking for? They WrestleMania was more of a, lack of a better description, it was more of a laundering scheme than it was an event. They were using it as money for other venues and banking on its mild success.
Yeah, I know how it started.
The Colossal Tussle, they actually originally wanted to call it.
I'll give you, I want to smarten, Eddie, can I smarten my young squire up a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, here's what happened. WrestleMania was funded almost completely by the sale of Jim Crockett's WCW to Ted Turner. Ted Turner gave Vince McMahon $1 million to leave TBS.
Mm-hmm.
That money was Turner Crockett money. Little did Jim Crockett know at the time, but his money would finance almost completely WrestleMania.
Yeah,
Am I there, Eddie?
No, you're right. That's what I was saying. They were using WrestleMania to roll the money they were getting for.
And the guy who brokered the deal was Jim Barnett. And
you know,
the aforementioned.
And you know who's now. Let me tell you this.
Yeah.
Here's what went down. Jerry and Jack Briscoe had controlling interest of Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Yes.
They
sold their
share to Vince,
yeah,
where he was in control. And then, Crockett and them went ballistic. Okay.
Right, with the
Ole
Black
Anderson
Saturday
and all that. And so they sold. Vince said, okay, you want me to leave? You give me $1 million or $2 million, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll sign the contract over to you. You can have TBS. That's when Crockett came in first. And that's before Turner took over and Bischoff, ATM Eric went into play. But
yeah.
but he went and had WrestleMania, and it was a huge success. And he even banked his mortgaged his house and everything. So
Sure did.
one thing you got to give Vince credit for, he rolled the dice on the big one and he won.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
if he had never won on WrestleMania 1, he would have been out of business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty clear, and that's the story that we've heard, and that's the story, Eddie, that we've actually told on the show. I don't think Dan quite knew the ins and outs of it because, he is just a pup. He's just, I call him the young squire.
Now, Angelo, let me ask you this. Okay, the No Wealth Alliance, right?
Yeah.
Well, I call it No Wealth Allowed in the NWA.
Yeah.
But next time you have Fuller on,
yes, sir,
he'll tell you about the monopoly that his whole family had, and ask him why in the world did all these guys go running and scared like a shotgun went off, right? When Vince started stealing guys like Orndorff and other people and Hogan, all that. Why did they run? Because they had all the TVs in those towns. And one of them said to me one time, well, they bought the TV that I was on. I said, well, hell, there's 3 other stations in the same damn town. They would love to have your show.
I'm looking at Ron Fuller's phone number right now. I'm half tempted to call. You don't know how bad I want to call Ron right now. You really don't. I'm half tempted to call him right now, but then he'd get pissed at me.
Yeah, well, just tell Stud hello for me. And so anyway,
yeah,
the bottom line is they couldn't run like a bunch of hillbillies.
Yeah.
and they
That's
really
funny.
did. And
Yeah.
and okay, if you had 35 territories, it's already been established forever, right? Okay, why couldn't you just go make your new stars like you always have done in the past?
Yeah. True.
And
That's
I mean,
funny.
if you got 35, if you have 35, right, territories, Vince only has towns that he picks and chooses to run, and mainly up north. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
I
I'm
mean, he
actually
couldn't have competed
texting
with
Ron
that.
Fuller right now. Eddie Mansfield says hi.
Well, let me ask you something, Eddie.
All
While
right.
while
I sent it.
while we were talking, you mentioned with the with loyalty and the NWA and all the purchase of the Georgia time slot and the expansion and Vince kind of rolling the money where he would bring in the stars and make money and use that money to bring in new stars, or I should say somebody else's stars. Um, do you think that model would have worked if the NWA had cooperated with itself, or was that something that only an outsider could have done?
Good question.
Well, if they would have stayed to the regular protocol of the NWA of building stars within, it would have worked, and they would have still been in business today.
Mm-hmm.
But they got scared of Vince McMahon because he would steal their talent. You know what I'd do? I'd build that son of a bitch up, and I'd put him on a contract. And if Vince would have stole him, right, he'd have had to pay me.
Eddie, the narrative for some time was that Vince McMahon went around to these various promoters that his dad did business with and offered them, large sums of money to join his crew, to join his group. He was the idea was that there was going to be this super fed, right? How many of those promoters, those old territory promoters, actually believed that, and how many already knew that it was bullshit?
Good question.
100%
Because
of them, I believe.
you were actually a part of that. You were
Well,
deep inside the territories.
well, yeah, I was in the NWA, AWA, and the WWF. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I was in all of those. And but the NBA, NWA, they were cut and run, and that's just some hillbillies like selling moonshine. They got their cut and they hit the hills. Yeah, it was over. And when you ask Ron Fuller, that'd be a good question to ask Tennessee Stud.
Yeah.
How come you cut and run when Vince McMahon showed up?
Good question.
Because
Buck
Robley, Buck Robley offered to run the damn thing.
We heard that.
He could have had Bruiser Brody. He could have had all these other guys.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually heard that. We actually heard Buck Robley was offered that head spot.
Yeah, and Buck was a great booker. I worked with Buck right after Wahoo. Robley and me, I'll never forget. Buck, he came by to get me at my condo in San Antonio, and he said, "Hey, my boy, how you doing?" I said, "I'm doing good." I said, "Buck," I said, "you must be stupid." And he says, "Why is that?" And I said, "And you must think I'm stupid." I said, "The only reason you're picking me up, number one, you're the booker. And number two, I'm the hottest heel in this territory, and you're trying to get a rub off of me. I know what you're doing."
Right.
And Buck just died laughing. And he would always, when he dropped me off at my home, he would always say, call me, Ed, keep me abreast, you know. So he let me tell you, he was one of the greatest bookers ever was.
Now let's talk about the opposite end of that spectrum. A guy who spent years and years in the business, was a longtime champion, but not necessarily known for his booking skills. Eddie, a guy that you worked for a long time, the late Vern Gagne.
Yeah, Vern, he wasn't really a great booker, and he had some guys in there booking it. He should have let Wahoo book. Wahoo was a great booker. We popped that San Antonio, Texas. I'll never forget. The first show I worked with Wahoo was in Del Rio, Texas, and I plugged it with Gordon Soley off of PBS. That I'm going to be in Del Rio, Texas against the Indian, right? And I used to call him a bogus Indian. So I'll be down there tonight. All I hear is about this Chief Wahoo. I said, he's a bogus Indian. Old drunk little wooden Indian at the liquor store. I'll see him tonight in Del Rio, Texas. Let's see what a legend of a legendary drunk looks like, Gordon Soley. And stuff like that. And that's the way you draw money, guys. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so that was really the first sellout Southwest Championship Wrestling had. I came and worked with Wahoo, and then we did a DQ, and then we went to the Hemisphere Arena.
Yeah.
First time I was in the Hemisphere Arena, and that set 22,000. Right?
Yes, sir.
You know how many people, and Tully Blanchard was on top. Mr. No, he couldn't set, that guy couldn't draw shit in San Antonio. And so anyway, 800 people. And so in less than a year, when me and Casey popped that place, we were drawing 22,000 people in the Hemisphere Arena.
Yeah.
Nice.
I got to talk to you, Eddie. You and I need to have a discussion about, and we'll bring Dan into this because he's got some interesting thoughts on this. You and I need to talk about why promoters think that it's a great idea to put their kids in the business. And shut up, Dan. And we need to talk about
really, not to dodge the question, but that's a question you should ask Ron Fuller.
Well, we did.
Because let me tell you something. The bottom line is it don't matter what territory they were in. There was either a Fuller or a Welch or Jarrett on the card, or Golden. There's another name, Golden.
Yeah, Jimmy Golden.
So,
well, there's a couple names I want to talk to you about because you know these people. Let's talk about a guy that was legendary in the state of Tennessee. Guy named Nick Goulis.
Oh my God, that's the guy. I chased that son of a bitch. I went in there and oh my God, that Nick Goulis. And what happened with me and Nick Goulis and Greg Brown and a bunch of other guys were there.
I'm asking you because I know the story. Go ahead.
So anyway,
why did Nick Goulis, Eddie? Tojo Yamamoto.
Yeah, I wrestled him on top, and it was one of the biggest crowds they ever had. You know what I mean? We drew about almost 10,000 people in Chattanooga at the pavilion there, at the college.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to, I was on a guarantee because I was sending from Atlanta.
Yeah.
So he was supposed to pay me $300, and then in the office in Atlanta would pay me the other.
Yeah.
And that son of a bitch gave me an envelope with $40 in it.
Oh no!
I told Dan, Eddie,
and
so help me God.
I reached in my Halliburton and grabbed my 38, and I went after his little ass. I chased him right across the stage with that 38. I said, I'm going to shoot you in your fucking ass, you damn no good bastard. And so
now,
I chased him, and then go ahead.
I told Dan that, and he didn't believe me. I told Dan that Nick Goulis was notoriously the single cheapest promoter in North America. And on
Well,
top
yeah,
of that,
yeah,
let's
yeah.
talk about Eddie. Let's talk about his son, George
Oh
Goulis.
my
Why
God.
did Nick think it was a good idea for his son to be a wrestler? And
Boy,
how did he
I
think
don't
he
know.
came?
I was only around him one time, and that was that time in Chattanooga,
Yeah.
and that was the biggest abortion you could ever watch. You know, I mean, gosh, that was horrible. And let me finish the story. I got him, and so I made him call the Atlanta office on the phone, collect, and leave a message. Right
Yeah.
about he only paid me $40. I had a gun on him, and so
That's
I left
ridiculous.
there, and I went over to this hotel. It was really nice in Chattanooga, and so I had a room there, and so I went down and I had a steak dinner, and then I went in the bar, and I charged my steak dinner to the room, and I went and there was a bunch of people drinking. I was drinking at the bar, and I bought everybody rounds and rounds and rounds. I had about a $450 tab, and so I just signed it. I just signed it to the room, right? And so I went on up. I had a good night's sleep, and came down the next morning. Hey girls, hey, how you doing? Oh man, I had a great time last night. Oh, blah blah blah, you know. And I said, hey, you know Nick Goulis? They go, yeah, we know Nick Goulis. I said, hey, you know, he paid for me to come in here, so you need to send the bill to this address. And I wrote it down for him.
That's the
And
story.
so,
Yep.
yeah, so I sent
I
him
heard that.
about a $600 bill for screwing Fat Eddie Mansfield. You don't do that to me.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the as one of Dan's favorite subjects, the future of wrestling. We call this show "Wrestling with the Future," and
Okay.
or should say, does wrestling have a future? So, Dan, you and Eddie have that discussion.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, Eddie. I don't know how familiar you are with the current product. We were clearly talking about the flips and the lucha libre and the crazy style. Just this week, the highest rated show was 1.4 million, which is
Ooh,
laughable
that's horrible.
numbers, horrible numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was something worth celebrating. I'm curious that the WWE has gotten to a point where between merchandise and networking and other things, ratings don't really matter to profit anymore. They're the worst series of months they've had in years or ever actually for their flagship shows, and report a $34 million quarterly growth, or I should say annual growth. I'm curious, looking at that, is that do you believe that to be a sustainable model? Is wrestling one of those things that
No,
as long
you
as you
can't.
get that, go ahead.
What's happening, Dan, is this. Uh, when you buy and program, and I'm a television producer. Okay, if I sell a program to a History Channel, A&E, or USA, or CMT, or whoever, or MTV, or whatever, I sell that, right, as a series. Well, if that series doesn't produce a good number, say like a 3.1 or something like that, that's decent,
Mm-hmm.
you won't be renewed. You'll be a one-shot wonder. So that's why you see shows go up and down real quick. They don't have any staying power. Now
Right.
wrestling, all right. Now wrestling, and here's where Vince is starting to run into it. Before all this pandemic and all this other stuff, and when the product was a lot better, he had higher ratings. He has no stars anymore. There's no Stone Cold. There's no Rock. There's no Shawn Michaels, no Hunter, none of those.
Yeah.
And what
What were we
happens,
just
guys?
talking about? The characters, Dan.
Right.
Well, they have no characters. They're all vanilla. They all look the same.
Exactly.
And, you know, what happened to being cowboys? What happened to Indians? What happened to blonde-headed guys? What happened to all this stuff? Wrestling is not wrestling anymore. He wants it all vanilla, where if one guy gets hurt, he can just put another guy in with a set of tights. Well, that is not the model that needs to be, because it's not working. The numbers, and always remember, all these networks have, you know, if Fox is paying him $1 billion, which they are, he's gonna have to maintain a certain rating, or he's gonna have to do buybacks.
Yeah. Crazy. Here's the thing. Now, I said something the other night when we had Dominic DeNucci on, and it sounded funny at the time, but believe it or not, people responded to this. What happened to wrestlers who had hair on their chest? What happened to wrestlers who looked like wrestlers? Guys like Bulldog Brower, Bruno, Dominic DeNucci, Superstar Billy Graham. What happened to these guys? They looked like wrestlers. You got kids now that weigh $150, maybe $170, and they're calling themselves, you know, a heavyweight champion. My right leg weighs 170, okay?
Yeah.
Hey, Angelo, I was always told this. If you look like the guy in the second row, hit the door.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now the wrestlers are smaller than the guy in the second row.
Exactly. That's my point.
They would never let them into business when I was in it. You know, I was 235, 240, you know, and I was in good shape. And it's, you know, 150, would devastate his ass on TV. I can tell you that. And I mean,
you saw guys back then, you know, especially you mentioned the era of the 3 and 4 minute matches. You know, the Mass Destroyer against Tim Smith, and Tim Smith weighs 150. You know he's going to get killed. Now I mentioned this before. They were building a character up in NXT as the monster heel, and he was 5'11". 5'11", and he's the biggest guy in the ring. Like, you have AEW takes a lot of flack for that. They have most of their roster is under 200 pounds, and it's hurts the believability when you have guys that don't, and I hate to say it because I'm sure some of them could probably beat me up. They don't look like athletes. They don't look like wrestlers. They don't look like fighters. So when I see these two skinny stick fucks pretending to beat each other up, and it looks terrible, it hurts. You get back in the day, even your enhancement talents or your mid card guys were beefs. And I mean, I look at like a Paul Roma or a Hercules Hernandez, some of these guys who were just these monster looking men, and they were at the bottom of the card, but they still look like athletes. They still look like monsters.
Well, Dan, you know, to your point, Dan, you know, look at the, you know, enhancement talent back in the day.
Right.
You know, I mean, the enhancement talent were huge. You had guys like Johnny Rods, Ron Shaw, and, you know, enhancement talent down south, like the Mulkey brothers, who were uber over.
Right.
You know, Eddie, you remember all these people, you know, they were believable. Eddie.
Yeah, and you know, I had a lot of these guys do jobs for me. And like Johnny Rod, I'd bring him out to LA from New York, right?
Yeah.
And we'd change his name to Java Rook.
Yes.
And me and Johnny Rod, he would be, because I was a top heel in LA, so I'd put him in my stable along with Bad Leroy Brown and the Hangman, right? And then I brought in the Twin Devils, and And so I would have a whole kind of mixture going. And Leo Garibaldi was a great booker himself. He was really
Oh my
good.
God, yes,
And,
yes.
and so me and Leo, here's how I got some real good information. I was sitting on row 3, seat 32. I'll never forget this in the Olympic Auditorium. Me and Leo. And I looked at Leo and I said, Leo, how can I make sure I get over? And because, Piper passed the torch to me, and I was, and I was coming in, and I wanted to get over. And me and Roddy were, me and him got over it together, and he was heading to Portland. So it was all mine. And so I asked Leo, he says, well, Ed, he said, I'm going to tell you something. He says, I can give you the finish of a match. And what you do in between the time the bell rings and the finish is going to make sure that you get over and stay over.
Yeah.
And wiser words were never spoken to me.
Absolutely.
And he didn't have to say that but one time. Because when
Yes, sir.
hey, let me tell you something. When you saw me, you got to see something. And I worked my butt off. And I left it all in the ring. And so
you mentioned Jabarook and Roddy Piper. Were you there the night that Piper had his one-on-one with Johnny Rods, a.k.a. Jabarook?
No, I wasn't there. I came right after that.
Okay. Yeah, I heard that Roddy got initiated to the business the hard way.
Well,
they broke him in the hard way.
I got to tell you, that Johnny Rods, I did this to them Guerrero boys. They were giant killers. And so I got Johnny Rods, and Johnny wasn't real crazy about Chavo anyway. And I looked over and I told him, I said, you know what that Mexican said about you? And he goes, no, what?
Oh,
he
shit.
said, you Puerto Rican guys suck.
Oh, shit.
And that's all I had to say to Johnny.
There's heat.
So,
There's heat.
Hey,
Good Lord.
hey, let me tell you something. That Chavo Guerrero was fighting and scratching for his life the whole match.
Oh, brother.
Oh, Johnny, I love
son.
Johnny Rods. Johnny Rods, hey, let me tell you, I was so happy when they put him in the Hall of Fame. Because let me tell you, Johnny Rods is not only a great trainer, but he put over so many guys. Him and S.D. Jones put over more guys.
Oh, yeah.
Than and made them legitimate, really stars because he could work. I mean, those guys, both of those guys could work.
Eddie, they said that, you would know something about this because you were there. They said that if you got past Johnny Rods or S.D. Jones, and you mentioned both of their names, they said if you got past Johnny Rods and S.D. Jones, that you were virtually guaranteed a place on the roster. Is that because they were that?
I would have got through both of them easy because I beat S.D. Jones in L.A. all the time. And Johnny Rods was in my stable in Los Angeles. So I would probably never wrestled him. But if I did, it would have been a great match because Johnny could work. And he was one of the most underrated. You talk about one of the most underrated talents in the business was Johnny Rodriguez.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It really was.
Yeah, he because of where I'm located, I'm in the New Jersey area, up here in the Northeast, and so we had access to Madison Square Garden, the Philadelphia Spectrum, Baltimore, Civic Arena, and because of my proximity to the WWF and then of course the WWF, we had access to these guys virtually every month. Because they would come to Philadelphia or nearby, just a drive away.
Yeah, and then you guys had USA Network,
Yeah.
When I was on Southwest Championship Wrestling, went right into New York.
Yeah,
And you
exactly.
had Hollywood Wrestling from Los Angeles going in there
Yeah,
from the
exactly.
Olympics.
Yeah. Oh, the Olympic Auditorium. We're actually going to
Yeah,
do a show. And you might be interested. Maybe I'll bring you back for this one too, Eddie, because I'm going to bring you back anyway. Um, we should do a show with you because you've wrestled everywhere. Dan and
right.
I are going to do a show on some of the best wrestling venues in the country because
Well, that
those are
Olympic
the
Auditorium. Oh my
yeah.
goodness, that was one of the best. That was one of the best. And I tell you what, Hemisphere Arena in San Antonio, Texas, was
Yeah,
a great. I mean,
absolutely.
oh,
The
I mean,
one,
and it
well,
was
I
a
mean,
tough
we can
crowd
do a
too.
whole show, but probably, and you probably know this, we could do a whole show just on the Sportatorium in Dallas.
Well,
You know,
and don't forget the you know God, the Sam Houston Coliseum in
oh God,
Houston,
yeah,
Paul Bosch,
sure,
and the Junction where we shot Southwest Championship Wrestling. I mean,
yeah.
there's so many places that are really
Sure.
phenomenal.
I
And
miss some of them. Some of them old buildings, man. I'll tell you what, we really need to do a show on some of the great wrestling venues because the buildings, in many ways, were part of the excitement, of part of the promotion. They were part of
oh,
wrestling.
absolutely, like in
Yeah,
San Bernardino. San Bernardino had a
Exactly.
custom for wrestling and boxing. San Bernardino,
Yes.
Long Beach, and the Olympic Auditorium, of course. That damn Olympic Auditorium, I got
Legendary.
stabbed twice there. I got stabbed twice there. That some bitch. I had to walk. Back in the day, you'd have to walk all the way down. It was so long. It was a long walk,
I know.
and so
I've
so
seen that aisle.
if you had a run in, I'd walk around and I'd come from the camera angle, right behind the cameras, and I'd run right in on hit the ring where they couldn't see me because they
Yeah.
were going to dead stab me, man. Hey, I tell you what,
Brother, I tell you what,
I
good old
wrestled
days.
Andre the Giant 7 times in L.A. and he never
Yes.
beat me because I was a top heel. He'd give me an ass bump, and I'd go over the top rope and leave.
Mm.
And so Andre was a good business guy. He said, "You can't beat him. He's the one that's over here. I'm just here for a week." And I
Yeah.
worked around. I tell you what, he picked me up and a press slammed me one time. And I swear to God, I saw a Mexican drinking a beer, eating a burrito, and shooting me a bird at the same time.
You know what, Eddie? Let me ask you a question, and this is something that
Uh,
you and Dan can explore. I'm going to ask you this question, and it just kind of hit me as you were talking. Can wrestling today benefit from a talent exchange program? Like if the WWE and AEW and some of these other groups, decided for the sake of the business to work together rather than
no, it
trying to
never
cut each
happened.
other's.
It won't work because Vince wants to control everything, and he has NXT now. So NXT is a feeder system for the main company WWE.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you know
Go
what I
ahead,
mean?
Dan.
And
Well, if also looking at the current product with talent moving, I don't want to say more than they did back in the day because the territory was always people were always in transit then. Every champion that AEW has right now outside of their women's division is a former WWE guy. So if they were to swap talent, there would be no new matches. Back in the territory days, you could go from just in Texas, you could go from Amarillo to Austin, and thousands of people had never seen you before. Now it's like half the talent on AEW I've seen wrestle the talent that they probably put him with in the WWE.
Yeah, so when you mentioned Amarillo, I sold out Amarillo, Texas, one of my proudest sellouts of all time. I sold out myself and Tiger Conway Jr. sold out Amarillo, Texas. Now, you understand that, Mr. Historian? Amarillo, Texas.
Yes, sir.
And there wasn't a funk on the card.
I was about to say, if you weren't, and that's not just Amarillo, across Texas, if you weren't a Funk, a Von Erich, or a Freebird, you didn't sell out at the top of the card anywhere in Texas.
Exactly.
Bullshit. You're talking to a guy
Well,
who did.
I know, obviously, I'm talking to an exception, but I'm saying that was the narrative back then.
Shit.
Yeah. Well, I proved the narrative sucked. I went in there and sold out everywhere. I went in that damn big-ass Baylor University Waco place and sold that sucker slap out.
Oh,
me
wow,
and,
that's
me
awesome.
and the Cowboy.
Yeah.
And the Cowboy.
Shoot.
And,
Yep.
and it, you know, and but that was my and I every time I tell Terry, every time I talk to Terry, and I talk to him all the time, I say, Funk, I sold out Amarillo without your ass and Junior. You know. And and I love Terry. Terry, man, I've known him like I knew Rocky Johnson since I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
So, I know all them guys. And they were a lot of help to me coming up. You know what's different? There's no respect in the locker room. For old timers.
Thank you.
That's even
so
though, hey, let
important,
me tell you something. Even though I was up on the card as a young kid, let me tell you something. I never, ever sat in a chair until every old timer that was on that card had a chair. Ever.
Yeah.
Now, I never would do that. And to this day, they don't even know what that means.
I know it.
Yep.
Well, Eddie, I'll tell you what, brother, that's
the kind of stuff that you can go in and depth with on your show, and Dan the historian can look up, and that's just a little kind of a shred of knowledge that you can use on other shows that is missing today.
No, you're not the first veteran from your generation that's told that story. A lot of even some of the and Angela will tell you, when we had some of the wives on, the women of wrestling have told the same story. There's no respect or admiration in the locker room. Karen McDaniel, would say that, back in the day, everybody would want to talk to Wahoo to help me with this, help me with that. Towards the end, he'd walk in the locker room and half the kids in there couldn't even be bothered to look up from their phone. And here's one of the greatest talents in history standing in front of you.
Think about that. He's not Eddie. He's not working you at all. He's straight shooting. Check this show out. You're gonna love this, brother. Karen McDaniel, Barbara Goodish, Bruiser Brody's wife, and Mrs. Jimmy Snooker on the show with us. And I'll tell you what, these women were amazing. They did not hold back. They were straight shooting.
What did Karen say about me?
Not a whole lot. Other than, you always tried to get under Wahoo's skin.
What do you mean?
Well, I call Karen now and let her explain.
No. No, I was Wahoo's guy.
She spoke. Karen, and they don't tell you. Karen, she speaks so well, and I'm not just blowing smoke. Karen speaks so well of the boys. She really, really does. Wahoo just loved his guys.
Yep.
He loved the business. He loved the business almost as he loved fishing, and he loved to go fishing.
Let me tell you, I'm going to tell you something, Angelo.
Yes, sir.
Wahoo McDaniel taught me how to be a star, how to live like a star, and do whatever I wanted, just like a star. And that's right. Exactly. And my love for Wahoo, it will be forever. And
absolutely,
he's one of the greats that we've lost, and it's so sad.
Well, I will tell you that we think.
You know what
so
Wahoo
much...
told me? My last conversation with Wahoo, you know, about he needed a liver transplant, not a kidney transplant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And me and him were cutting up. I said, well, hell, I'll give you one. I don't need but one. He said, yeah, but you ain't no Indian. And so he said, you ever know any Indians got a good liver or a good kidney? I said, no, not really, Wahoo. I said, I hate to hear that, you know, because Chief's still funny to me because we'd always cut up.
Yeah.
And next time you talk to Scott Casey, you know, the Chief never called him by his name.
Yeah.
You know what he used to call him?
I heard drawing a blank right now, but I do know that he never called him Scott. I don't know if it was a cowboy or whether it was that he had some other nickname.
No, he just looked, hey motherfucker, get over here.
Oh shit.
That's what he said. That's
There
what
you
he
go.
said all the time.
Well, I'll tell you what, brother. We are
Next time you
bringing
talk to,
back.
hey, you talk to my good friend Cowboy Scott Casey. Be sure to ask him what Wahoo used to call him. He'll tell you.
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to speak to him tomorrow. But before I do, let me do this while I got you here, because I want to bring you back again. Eddie, can I get you back on October the 8th?
Well, can I check? I got to go into a production. Can I pencil me down for that and let me see how my schedule is?
Okay.
And because I'm going into production in the next. I'm in pre-pro right now.
Right.
So I'm gonna go in and shoot that. I got to do a Christmas special.
Okay.
And which is.
I'll have Dan pencil that in. Dan, pencil in Eddie for October 8th, and then if we need to change him up, then we will. But I got to have Eddie back on. I really do. Eddie, when you see the video version of this show, which you will get a copy tonight, the opening credits of our show, the first face you're going to see is Wahoo McDaniel. We love Wahoo here. And Karen is a very, very dear friend of the show. I am going to call you tomorrow. I'm going to hit you up for a favor.
Okay, what's that?
I'll just tell you right now. I'm going to hit you up for a favor tomorrow. So, Dan, what do we got going on? And then we're going to get some info from Eddie as to what people are doing in his realm and where people can reach him and how they can contact him. Oh, sure, let's do that now. So why don't we do this, Eddie? Where can people get a hold of you?
Just call me tomorrow. Just call me tomorrow.
Okay, you got it. Go ahead, Dan. Where can people find us?
Well,
hey,
obviously we're
because I usually I don't solicit business. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's fair.
And you know, I mean, you know, if they want to find me, they can look on LinkedIn.
There you go.
Know, Eddie Mansfield.
Beautiful.
Mansfield Entertainment. You know, that's where they can find me.
Yes, sir.
Eddie can be reached at stosselcansuckit@gmail.com or something like that.
There you go. Exactly.
Well, I pretty much, you know, if you listen to that Viceland deal, I pretty much told it like it was. And
amen.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
It's the first time.
I use and excuse me for using those 4-letter words, but I had to quote Wahoo McDaniel what he used for Scott Casey.
Absolutely. So, we have no language parameters here, and Dan will tell
Yes,
you
sir.
we let it flow here.
Okay.
Very much an adult show.
Yeah, and Dominic DiNucci has the same vocabulary. Oh, God, we love Dominic.
If you talk to Dominic, send him my best and tell him I love you to death. Hey, there's another.
Sir.
Hey, let me tell you another guy you ought to get on. Larry Zabisco.
Actually, if I had a contact number for Larry, I'd call him myself.
Well, when you call me in tomorrow, I'll give it to you.
Yes, sir. Beautiful.
That would be great.
Terrific. Well, I'll tell you what, Dan, we can always count on action, story, drama, suspense, intrigue. Whenever we have the old school guys on, that's why I tell people, keep the new school. I'm a product of the old school. Give me old school every day, brother, every day.
Yes, sir.
There was never a dull moment. Never, ever. So
Well,
tell
thank you,
people where
guys.
they can reach us, brother.
Well, obviously, we're on YouTube. We can be found on Twitter at Wrestling Future. That's no G, Wrestling Future. We're on Instagram, Wrestling with the Future, and our Facebook group, Wrestling with the Future Podcast, which has blown up in the last 2 weeks or so, last couple weeks in membership, including a couple more today. So we continue to expand, and we can be found on social media, and the podcast can be found pretty much anywhere podcasts are downloaded at this point.
Absolutely. We are everywhere. Right now, 145 platforms worldwide.
Yes, sir.
Craziness. And maybe
Well,
a surprise.
you'll have some more listeners when you plug my name. Believe me.
Well, I got news for you. The anticipation of your appearance garnered a shitload of heat. I'll tell you what, and I'll tell you straight shoot. The two names that got me more heat than anything, Eddie Mansfield and B. Brian Blair.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. And I don't
Brian
know
Blair.
why on Brian.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, you know.
Yeah. He likes you. I mean, we talked about you. He likes you a lot.
Eddie?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you guys are close. I know that.
Yeah. And so I can't believe he's getting heat. He's babyface.
I know. It's crazy. Crazy.
Yeah, all you got to do is mention my name. You're going to get some damn heat.
Yeah, oh, I know it, brother. Please.
Right.
But that's all right. Hey, tell him the Continental Lover sends his best.
I sure will, brother.
All your listeners, hey, may God bless you guys, keep you healthy, and keep your families, all your listeners' families healthy. And
Amen.
thank you for having me, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eddie. Eddie Mansfield,
Right.
everyone. Good night,
Good
Eddie.
night,
Take
everybody.
care. That was beautiful. I love that interview. That was a great interview.
Sir.
So filling in the week coming up, Dan, we've got Tuesday night, one of our favorite people joins us. Like another guy, old school guy that's never short of a story. Our friend, the superstar Bill Dundee.
Yes, sir.
Will be here Tuesday. Let's see, Thursday night of next week. Who do we have? We got so much going on right now. Oh my goodness. Who do we got coming? We have October 1st. I don't know if I mentioned this to you or not, but October 1st, Dan the Man, we've got Butch Reed, Hacksaw Butch Reed, a.k.a. The Natural, will be with us October 1st. I wasn't sure if I had told everybody that. Eddie Mansfield, of course, was with us tonight. Lot of feedback, by the way, from our episode with Stephen Plim. Stephen Plim, the manager of Tiny Tim, got a ton of feedback, and he is actually coming back for his third appearance. So this guy's going to have like his own mini series on our network, I swear it. But September 29th, we are going to have superstar Bill Dundee. I can't wait for that one. And then, as I said, October 1st. Can't believe it's the end of the month already. That's crazy.
I think it's fitting, too, Bill Dundee being the longest tenured friend of the show we have to be the anniversary episode, the guest on our anniversary episode.
Absolutely. And we are going to talk about the last year of our show. And we're gonna share some stories about Jeff the Ref, who will always, and I promised his family, he'll always be a part of the show. He always was and always will be, and we'll never, ever forget Jeff the Ref.
Yes, sir.
We are represented by the smartest man in the room, who was one of the ref's friends. Let me tell you something. You had to be damn smart to be able to fill them shoes, because he knew
That man was a walking wrestling encyclopedia.
Do you know that? In fact, that's where I used to call him. I used to call him the Encyclopedia Britannica of pro wrestling, the guru who knew.
The guru who knew. I remember that.
Yes.
Yep. If wrestling was a category, Jeff would be on my trivia team in a heartbeat.
Oh my God, are you kidding? He would be first round draft. Straight shoot.
First overall pick without question.
It's funny, I just as a personal note, sometimes I sit here and I watch, episodes of our show and I critique it, and very often I go and there's an episode that Jeff is on, and it's really hard to sit through an episode with Jeff knowing that like that gravelly voice is not here anymore. It's hard. It still affects me. It affected me profoundly because I spoke to him less than an hour before he passed away.
That's right. You were, if I remember correctly, you were the last phone call that he had.
Yeah, which is, it still makes me, it does one of these jobs,
I can understand that.
Yeah, it's craziness. You never know, man. Life is funny. You never know. That's why I quit smoking. That's one of the reasons I stopped smoking. That's one of the reasons I dropped the psychic from mine. I'll tell everybody now. Because people have asked, how come you dropped the psychic? I'll tell you why. I have given up my calling. I'll just address it right now. I have accepted Jesus Christ as my personal savior, and I have given up that craziness that I did for so many years. And stop smoking. I want to live longer, and I pay tribute to my friend Jeff the Ref. So I drink my coffee and water instead of smoking a cigarette. Anybody that's watched some of our old episodes, I'm going to show you something. This is my coffee cup. Okay, can you see that, Dan?
Yes, sir.
I'll move the mic out. Okay, that's a 24-ounce cup.
Mm-hmm.
I used to drink 40s a day. Now I drink decaf. Same cup. Yeah, decaf, and water. And I've lost weight.
Good
and
for
my
you.
Diabetes has gone down. And I don't smoke anymore. And I don't eat anymore. I have the same appetite, the same level of food. The only difference now is after dinner, I can't light up.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part, though. After you eat a meal, you want to fire up a smoke and kick back and put your feet. Now I just crack open a bottle of water. But I'll tell you, I miss you, Jeff. I'll tell you what, brother, we're going to pay tribute to you, brother. Dan the Man, enjoy the weekend coming up. It's going to be a warm one here in New Jersey, brother.
Yeah, hopefully the weather improves for both of us.
Amen. For Dan the Man Sebastiano, the smartest guy in the room, always the happy haberdasher, I'm Angelo DeCipio. We'll see you next week. Same time, same bat time, same bat stay. It's Wrestling with the Future on YouTube. You know where to find us, folks. Happy wrestling, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Do you have sweaty balls or volleyball netty balls? It's time to make them ready balls. The Manscaped.com Lawnmower 3.0 will do the job and clean your knob with its patented no-nick head, so your head will function as desired. Enter promo code WrestlingFuture for a generous 20% discount. That's enter WrestlingFuture for a 20% discount. Manscaped.com and Wrestling with the Future, going balls to the walls with Manscaped.com. And the Lawnmower 3.0, your balls will thank you. And so will we.